Let's talk some chess. This is one of the cooler games I've reviewed. It takes place in the New York City park. It's Maurice Ashley, who went to high school and college in New York playing against a chess hustler, which I think goes by the name of Wilson. I couldn't find a good picture of him, but I'll link the video below so you can check out the video and see it there. And I don't believe that Wilson knew that Maurice Ashley, who was a grandmaster, was such an amazing chess player. So that's sort of what made it fun is, Wilson starts out very confident and, like he's going to beat them. And then obviously Maurice Ashley turns on the Jets. So a really fun game. We'll kick it off with b4 from Wilson. Already a sort of strange move that, you don't really want to play in high-level series games. It's referred to as the Polish opening. Obviously, a pawn on b4 is not super useful. You want to control the center and develop your pieces, which is not achieved by this b4 move. So Maurice plays e5, controlling the center himself. And what's nice about this move is it opens up an attack from the dark squared bishop to the b4 pawn. So this forces Wilson to play a3, protecting this pawn here. And now we get knight to f6 from Maurice. And already you can see this is the problem with the Polish opening. White has two pawns on the side of the board. Black has a nice central pawn and a knight developed, and this is already a better position with the black pieces. So don't play b4 on your first move. And if someone does play b4 on their first move, just play e5 and continue from there. So bishop to b2, fianchettoing the dark squared bishop, attacking this pawn on e5. Maurice defends it simply with d6, and now d3. Developing it or pushing a bit in the center. Bishop to e7 is played by Maurice. I'm going to lower the volume a little bit. I feel like it's a bit loud. Okay, and knight to d2 from Wilson. Maurice castles kingside. We have knight to f3 and now a5, trying to break up this pawn structure here. And here Wilson moves his bishop to b1. What you want to play here is g3, just sort of ignoring this threat, maybe preparing to fianchetto this bishop. The reason why is because after the rook comes to b1, Maurice can just exchange a takes on b4, a takes on b4, and now he has an open file to his rook, and the rook is controlling the a file, and this is great for Maurice. So already you can see Maurice has his king castled, he has two pieces out, and he has an open file for his rook, whereas Wilson has a pretty questionable pawn structure, and the king is nowhere near castling. So this is already not looking very good if you're playing with the white pieces. Knight to c6 here, c3, again, blocking this bishop in, but you sort of have to do something to defend this pawn on b4, which I should have mentioned. The knight is attacking when it develops to c6, and now rook to e8, getting the rook on the same line as this king, which is still stuck on e1. e4 here, pushing in the center, and now bishop to g4, pinning this knight on f3 to the queen. So just making the most of the space on the board and pinning the other pieces. e2 here, which is a fine move, breaking the pin and sort of pushing back, preparing to potentially castle. And now bishop to f8, a really nice retreat here from Maurice, giving his rook some space on the e-file, although it's very closed as of now. Maybe it'll open up in the future, who knows. And just a sort of waiting move to see what Wilson does. And Wilson does indeed castle kingside, and this allows, maybe after this, Maurice decides to push in the center with d5, and now sort of get some combinations and exchanges happening. So for now, we get h3, ignoring this attack and forcing this bishop to make a decision. Do you want to capture? Do you want to retreat? Here, Maurice just just retreats, not captures, just retreats. I don't really like this h3 move just because it's very easy for the bishop to retreat, and it's not like you're going to play g4, because then your king side is just totally open and these pawns are in space and the king is open. So I never liked this move in this position, but what do I know? I guess it does get the bishop off of this diagonal, which is important. So anyways, bishop to h5, and now e takes on d5, so capturing this pawn on d5, and now knight to d5. Getting the knight closer to the center of the board. And here it is a better position for black, but it's actually okay here if you sort of make the proper moves. But it's hard to find the right move here with the white pieces. And in this case, Wilson plays a move that looks very reasonable, but is not correct and doesn't work. Plays knight to h2. And the idea here is, he probably has recognized that Maurice is a very good chess player, so now he's playing a little bit of defense, getting these pieces around the king, and opening up a discovered attack on the light squared bishop on h5, which is undefended. And the light squared bishop on e2 is defended by the queen, so this looks totally fine. But it's not, and we'll see why. Yeah, well, we'll see what happened first. So Maurice jumps right into it with bishop takes on e2, queen takes on e2, and now knight to f4. The f4 square is undefended, and the knight is obviously attacking the queen, so you have to do something about this. Here the queen moves to f3. Any of these moves there's no good move here with the queen, because what happens next is queen takes on d3, and there's no real way to prevent this. The knight and the queen are eyeing this d3 pawn, and there's no way to move this queen away from the knight and also protect this pawn twice with the queen and another piece. So here you just have to give up the pawn. So queen takes, and now Maurice is up a pawn, and he has very active pieces close to the enemy king. And we'll see how sort of the game continues. So we have a queen trade, queen takes, knight takes, and now knight h to f3, which again looks like a very well. Let me talk about the other line first before we go into this. The proper move to play here instead of knight to h2. It's a weird looking move, but it's g3, and I would never play this move because it looks like it opens up the king side, which it does. It undefends the knight from the pawn on g2. Now the knight is, well, I shouldn't even say that. It's still defended 3 times by the other knight and the bishop and the queen. So it's not really undefended. But it just looks like a strange move. But this move prevents knight to f4 because the pawn is now guarding f4. And we saw in the other line how important this knight to f4 move is to team up on the d3 pawn with the queen. So that's the idea here. And it's a kind of an interesting line, so we'll talk about it. Here you might get b5 from Maurice. Rook to a1, rook trade, queen trade. Queen captures, queen to d7 now, eyeing this h3 pawn. And this looks like it's a problem, but you actually just play rook to e1 here and ignore the threat of queen takes on h3. Because of queen takes on h3, you have this really nice knight to g5 move. And what's awesome about this move is it attacks the queen and also, again, opens up a discovered attack from the bishop to the bishop. The queen has to move. It can't attack the enemy king anymore because it will be captured by the king on all of these squares. So the queen has to retreat, and now bishop takes on h5, and queen can take back, but this is totally fine with the white pieces. So because of this knight to h5 or knight to g5 move, this position works. I just thought that was worth showing. It is a hard line to find, especially when you're not playing with a ton of time. So we can't really blame Wilson at all for not finding it. And of course, he's playing against an incredible grandmaster, so we can't blame him in any case for not finding these moves. But just a line to note. So anyways, knight to h2. We see the combination here: bishop takes, queen takes, knight to f4, attacking the queen and the pawn. Queen moves, queen takes, and now how do you continue? We have a queen trade, knight takes queen, and now knight to h3. Looks like a very reasonable move. You're connecting the 2 knights, getting this knight back into the game, but now rook to h2. And Maurice is making the most possible use of this h-file that was open to his rook after the weird sort of Polish opening. So rook to h2 attacks the bishop, and just generally gets the rook deep into the enemy position. Very, very active rook now and going to be tough to deal with. So in addition to being up a pawn, he has this amazing rook on a2. Here, bishop to c1 is played, but, trying to... And I should mention, this bishop is attacked twice by the knight and the rook, so it is threatened to be... if you make a silly move here, the knight captures and you are just up material. So you have to do something about this. Wilson sees this and brings the bishop to c1. This saves the bishop from the rook, at least. It's still under attack by the knight, and it adds protection to this knight on d2, which is now protected by the bishop and the knight. So seems like everything is okay. Seems like you can hold this position and defend, although your pieces are certainly a little bit awkward. But then Maurice just breaks the whole thing open by playing e4. And now the problem is the pawn is attacking the knight on f3, and this knight is, of course, defending the knight on d2. So now you're in trouble because if this knight moves away, then we'll just see sort of what happens. So the knight does move away. The knight moves to d4, still staying in the center of things, attacking the knight on c6. But now we get first we get knight takes on d4, pawn takes on d4, and now knight takes on c1. So essentially what Maurice did was he removed both defenders of this knight on d2. defended by the bishop and the knight on f3. e4 removes the knight on f3. That knight moves, and then knight takes on c1, of course, removes the bishop on c1. Rook takes, and now Maurice is up a pawn. He's up a bishop, and this game is all but over. But they continue playing on, and I should actually mention that this was the position where, probably the funniest part of the video, after Maurice takes the pawn, takes the knight on d4, Wilson takes back with the pawn, and then he tries to do this thing where he picks up the knight, tries to move it. He basically moves the pawn away. I can't do it here, but he moves the pawn away, tries to put the knight on d4, and then moves the pawn back and capture this knight on d4. So he tries to basically capture both of these. So if you can envision it, pawn takes knight, move the pawn, move the knight to d4, capture the knight on d4 with the pawn again. So basically he tried to capture both knights, and Maurice obviously saw it, and he's like, whoa, let's keep it clean here. But they're very funny sequence. I recommend checking it out in the video. Probably the funniest part of the game. Would have been cool, would have been cool if he had pulled it off. He would have picked up 2 knights with just 1 pawn, but of course Maurice saw it and put an end to it. So again, knight takes on c1, rook takes, and now this is just a winning endgame. We'll go through the rest of the moves just for fun. Here, rook takes on c7, a very nice rook lift, getting the rook onto the 7th rank, but you just get rook takes on d4 back by Maurice. Rook takes on b7, but now rook takes on b4. And it looks like this is a terrible rook sacrifice, but it's not, because don't forget about this bishop that was really nicely retreated to f8, defending the rook on b4. We have a rook exchange, and now again, Maurice just has a pawn and a bishop, and this is totally over. So here we get rook to b1, attacking the bishop, hoping at this point maybe for mistakes, maybe Maurice will run out of time, but just bishop to c4, to c5 is fine. Rook to c1, and now rook to e5. You couldn't have a rook lift defending the bishop before, because the pawn is taking away the e4 square, but now that the bishop is on the 5th rank, the rook can be lifted in defense of the bishop, and so this is fine. And again, it's, I would not be super confident playing this move, because you do have back rank issues. If the white rook makes it to the back rank, this is checkmate, but of course, Maurice is in control. He's not super worried about that. But be careful in your games, because we are, unless you are watching Maurice, chances are the person watching is not as good, and so be careful about these back rank issues. So here, king to f1, f5 now, getting rid of the back rank issues and protecting this pawn on e4. King to e2, g5, g3. King moves up, rook moves to b1. The rook cuts off any chance of a check here, getting behind in the position. Rook to b5, attacking the bishop. The rook defends, the king retreats, the king advances, the king advances, the king advances. Rook back to b1, rook to a7 now, preparing to, taking again the biggest advantage of this a file. Check, rook check, bishop blocks, king to f1, and now again the same move that we saw before with the other rook, rook to a2, and now this is a super active rook. You are eyeing this a2 pawn with the bishop and the rook, and this is no good at all. You can't play it just yet because the bishop is pinned to the king, but just keep an eye out for that. F4 here, e takes on f3 en passant, so maybe going for some tricks here, but obviously Maurice knows the rules of chess, and now this is just completely over. Here Wilson ends the game by taking on d4 with check. Maybe he's hoping here that Maurice won't see that he's in check and will play h6 or an illegal move, but of course Maurice sees it, takes the rook, and Wilson resigns the game. So an awesome game. Highly recommend checking out the video. Really fun. Again, I just did another video like this with Magnus and Bill Gates, but it's always funny when we see very good, solid chess players playing against just an awesome grandmaster, and it's a little bit unfair at times, but it is fun to watch and analyze. So credit to Wilson for going on camera and playing against Maurice Ashley, who obviously is one of the best chess players in the world. So thank you so much for watching. Drop a like, drop a subscribe. Let me know of any games you'd like me to review, and we'll see you next time.